The Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge in action for the penultimate time this season and racing around the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. It is their second race of the weekend that is about to get underway. The first one yesterday was a very, very hard-fought race that saw Harley Horton take a step closer to the 2022 championship, but the points are still tight, and in fact, mathematically, it's now not possible for him to win it here today, so it is going to go down to the wire. The question is, how much of an advantage will he have over his Elite Motorsport teammate Will Jenkins, who chased him home in the 20-minute encounter yesterday afternoon. The same is true of the AM Class Championship, where Chris White is trying to get as close to sealing the deal as he can here today, whilst the likes of Karim Sekat and Paolo Santi try their best to stop him. It's an important race coming up then. The cars lining up, as you can see, on the 2x2 grid, with there on pole position the championship leader Harley Horton, the number 20 car from Elite Motorsport. Took him a long time to win a race this season. In fact, it took him the whole first 8 races of the season, but then in race number 9 at Thruxton he won, and he hasn't stopped winning since. 5 race victories on the trot, and he's aiming to make that number 6 here this afternoon. Alongside him though will be his teammate, his nearest championship rival Will Jenkins, who was runner-up to him yesterday, and in third position Mikey Doble, the Zentech Motorsport driver, who is running, coming into this race, 4th in the points, but only 4 points behind Conor Grady, who he starts a few places ahead of. Ruben Haig was quick yesterday, but whilst contesting the lead on the first lap, got eased out wide onto the gravel at Hawthorns, dropped down the order, recovered pretty nicely though after that to finish eventually in 5th position, but he'll definitely be gunning for race victory here today, what would be his first of the season. And then you've got on the third row of the 19 car grid Will Orton and Conor Grady, who, like I said, is trying to hang on to this third place in the championship. Within the AM class, Chris White starting alongside his Raceway Motorsport teammate Paolo Santi. Spoke to both of those earlier on this morning. They're both up for the fight here this afternoon. Chris just trying his best to stay out of trouble, and Paolo having moved ahead now of Karim Sekat for second place in the championship. So that is in a way now the most entertaining of the points battles within the AM class, as Chris White enjoys a healthy little lead now heading into this middle race of 3 here this weekend. So the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge, the highest level of racing within the G40 element of the Ginetta racing ladder. We've seen already earlier on today the G56s in the GT Academy race, a very entertaining race that was, but the G40 is slightly lower powered but on full racing slick tyres, and this is a very competitive grid. It's a hard championship to win races in, and that's what makes Harley Horton's recent run of victories all the more impressive, really. 5 wins, like I said, on the bounce, 2 at Thruxton, 2 at Croft, both of them on the British Touring Car package, and now they're back here on the British GT events for their final 2 rounds. 3 races here at Brands Hatch, 3 at Donington in a few weeks' time. So the cars make their way around on the green flag lap. Let's take a look at how they line up. Harley Horton on pole, like I said, with Will Jenkins alongside him. Will really needs to try and beat Harley in this one and take some points out of him. Mikey Doble starting 3rd. Ruben Haig, rapid this weekend, didn't have the best of luck yesterday. He'll start 4th with Will Orton and Conor Grady on the 3rd row together. Row 4 for Cian Donaldson and Harry Mangan, another one of the Elite Motorsport Brigade, starting alongside him. Dave Sutton and Ignazio Zanon rounding out the top 10. 6th row of the grid for Oliver Cottam and Sam Harvey. Oliver Cottam making his debut this weekend. And then the AM front row, Chris White and Paolo Santi, the 2 teammates at Raceway Motorsport. It's White who has that healthy championship lead. 2nd row within the AM class is where you find Karim Sekat, who had, I believe it was a drive shaft failure on the warm-up lap yesterday, so he'll be hoping to at least make the start here this afternoon. He's got Balstidu for company, Elite Motorsport alongside Zentech Motorsport, and then another 2 Zentech drivers behind, Gerson Zappello, the Brazilian driver, alongside Mike Doble, father of Mikey, who we see starting in the 3rd place overall. Phil McGarty rounding out the 19 starters. So cars making their way around in the beautiful sunshine. It's a really pleasant day here today at Brands Hatch. Perfect track conditions, really. Not a huge amount of wind. It has been a very, very pleasant weekend as we move into autumn now, but it does rather feel like summer is clinging on as long as it can, which I'm all for. The drivers, though, telling me before just how hot it gets inside of these cars. 50 degrees when it's a warm, sunny day, and they're in them for a lot longer than the 20-minute race, really, because they have to sit in the cars for a while in the assembly area, then they come round to the grid, then they sit there for another couple of minutes, then there's a green flag lap, and only then do you go racing for 20 minutes. In yesterday's race, That 20 minutes equated to 12 racing laps, so looking, barring any safety cars or red flags, looking for another 12 lapper here this afternoon. So the yellow and black car then, Harley Horton on pole, Will Jenkins the white and blue alongside him. Teammates but championship rivals, so I think the fact that they're run out of the same awning has to go out of the window now, because Will Jenkins really needs to try and grab himself a race victory if he can. He had a win earlier on in the season at Silverstone, at Donington and at Alton, but hasn't won in the second half of the season yet. Can he change that here at Brands Hatch? The red lights go on, they go out. Now we're away and racing, and it is a good start by Jenkins. Horton is perhaps going to be beaten into the first corner, although the second phase of the start brings the yellow car with his nose back ahead on the inside line. Ruben Haig is away well once again on the outside of row number 2, but they go 2 by 2 into Paddock Hill Bend. Horton holds onto the lead. Jenkins second, Doble and Haig side by side for third. So job done so far for Harley Horton in that he's kept the lead, but these cars very slipstreamy, very hard to break away at the front of the pack. Will Jenkins needs to try and latch onto his teammate in the early stages. For the second race in a row, Ruben Haig gets elbowed out wide on the first lap of the race, this time at Druids, and falls actually a few places back. Cian Donaldson there getting past him in the 97 car through Graham Hill Bend. So Horton then leads, Jenkins second, Doble third. There side by side is Ruben Haig back on the inside of Cian Donaldson. In fairness, leaves Cian with plenty of space on the exit of the corner, gets the move done anyway, and Conor Grady moves up to challenge too. So it was a good start that from Cian Donaldson. Initially started 7th, he was running 5th after the first couple of corners, but now in danger of getting shuffled back again as they head onto the GP loop. Through Hawthorne. There, Conor Grady looking to try and get the run. Oh, a slow car further back. That's Mike Doble, I'm afraid. So Mike Doble is pulling into the back end of the pit lane. His race done before he even gets halfway around the first lap. Race at the front, though, is not done. Will Jenkins is latching on to his teammate Harley Horton. Those two escaping from Mikey Doble in third, who's got lots of pressure here from Ruben Haig, but it looks like Jenkins is really up for the fight here, and he might have found a gap on the inside, heading for Clearway's corner. I think he has. No, not quite. Horton just closes the door, then switches back to the outside to get the better line into Clearway's corner, but on the first lap on cold tyres, Will Jenkins seems to have the edge over Horton, and he knows that this might be his one and only chance to attack. He pulls to the outside as they come almost level across the line at the end of lap 1. Jenkins from the outside wanted to dive to the inside line, but just couldn't quite get there. Lots of defensive driving required from Harley Horton, who drifts a little bit wide of the apex through Paddock Hill Bend, gets over to the right-hand side of the track, though, to cover into Druids, and again keeps Jenkins at bay. Mikey Doble third, Will Horton into 4th place, 1 place gain for him at the expense of Ruben Haig, who is 5th, Cian Donaldson 6th, Conor Grady is in 7th position. The AM class being led by Paolo Santi, by the way, so Paolo Santi, their look, is just ahead of Chris White, so the white car with the black stripe, number 77, that is Paolo Santi. Again, teammates at play there, and he's got himself ahead of Chris White. That's a bit of a turn up for the books. Cian Donaldson there trying to fend off Conor Grady as they head through Surtees, succeeds in doing so. But Conor, with a slightly better run, carries the momentum over the top of the hill, down Pilgrim's Drop, just trying to get that overlap, get a bit of a side draft maybe down the hill. Oh, that's Paolo Santi. So Paolo Santi was leading the AM class. He is no longer, because he has rotated coming out of Surtees. Couldn't quite see whether he'd made the barrier or not, but he has at least got a car going again, and will rejoin the race, but having now, of course, handed the class lead back to Chris White. Second in the class will be Karim Sekat, and of course that means that Paolo's losing points against Karim now in their ongoing fight for second in the points. Leading group just starting to settle down now. Harley Horton, with half a lap or so of not having to defend from Will Jenkins, has put a couple of car lengths between them. So Horton leading them down into clearways for the second time, but Jenkins still well within slipstreaming range. Every time we see Conor Grady and Cian Donaldson, they're door to door, and every time it is Cian who manages to hang on. Conor Grady unable to get to the outside. So Horton leads then, Jenkins second, third Mikey Doble. Was Doble quicker than them that time? He was slightly quicker than Jenkins, certainly. Conor Grady, meanwhile, almost falling behind Dave Sutton now, so that wide line through clearways did not work for Conor. And so Dave Sutton, with the switchback maybe out of Paddock Hill Bend, thinks about it, but Conor just about had that inside line covered. And Dave Sutton will again, though, get a chance on the exit, because Conor Grady's taking some very inventive racing lines around the Indy part of the circuit. I'm not convinced they're working for him, and he will have to turn his eye to defence again, I suspect, heading down towards Surtees. Yes, he does. Pulls to the middle of the road down the Cooper Straight, then just blends back over towards the racing line when he realises that Dave Sutton isn't going to launch an attack on the inside. Ooh, out wide in the background, number 44, that was Harry Manjum. And he's been been having a nice little squabble here with Ignazio Zanon. Those two were battling yesterday as well, with Zanon stuck behind him again in the early stages of this one. So Horton then leading the way, Jenkins second. Jenkins in the first sector on this lap was a couple of tenths faster in that slipstream, although the first sector is basically the Indy circuit, so the slipstream doesn't have quite such an effect around there. It's really out on the GP loop where you might expect Will Jenkins to close in ever further. And there you can see he has done exactly that. So Will Jenkins back to within a car length or so of the lead, and a good exit from the next corner at Clearways might be enough to allow him to attack into Paddock Hill Bend. Needs to try and force a mistake out of Harley Horton. That's not something that we've seen a lot of from Harley this year. The car doesn't seem to be as well settled this afternoon as it was yesterday. The front of the car perhaps struggling for grip a bit through Clearways. Again, Harley understeers wide, and now with the toe down the straight, Jenkins definitely closes in, pulls to the outside, not trying to go right round the outside, but instead trying to get that switch back, carry the momentum down the dip. But Harley Horton is so good at going into that corner tight and coming out of it just as quickly as the driver behind, and it means he doesn't then have to really defend into Druid's corner. Jenkins with the fastest lap though, 140.4, 3 tenths faster than the leader that time around, but the gap is not particularly relevant really when it's down to a car length or so. It's only going to get closer when Jenkins has a go at getting through, you suspect, and that doesn't come at Surtees. Chris White, meanwhile, has got his hands full in this race, hasn't he? That's Oliver Cottam, no, Sam Harvey who's got ahead of him, Oliver Cottam behind him. Now, these are both pro drivers. Chris was talking to me earlier on this morning about battling against these pros. You only score points within your class, so your overall finishing position doesn't really matter. In other words, he could allow Oliver Cottam through and it wouldn't make a difference to his championship position. But he doesn't want to, because that will then mean that he's only one car ahead of Karim Sekat, who is fighting for championship positions. So Chris White kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, sort of has to race these drivers, even though he feels that he is probably faster than them, and it's maybe a risk that's not worth taking. But Sam Harvey, having found a way past Chris White, hanging on tenaciously, as Sam himself and Oliver both try and get quicker with every race that goes by as they learn these cars. Chris White, of course, a couple of seasons into racing Ginetta G40s these days. That's why he's been the runaway and championship leader through the middle part of the season. But Karim Sekat lurking ominously in the background there. The elite motorsport driver, the yellow and black car with the red roof, is, I would argue, closing on this trio now. Meanwhile, Will Jenkins is up the inside of Harley Horton for the lead. Hits the curb a bit too hard at Paddock, though. Runs out wide. Horton back up the inside towards Druid's corner. Will Jenkins well up for the fight here today, but Harley Horton so far has an answer to every question being asked of him by his championship rival, and Jenkins still cannot make the race lead his. He was briefly ahead, hit the curb a bit too hard through Paddock, drifted out wide, and Harley Horton needed no second invitation to get back up the inside and reclaim the race lead. So Horton stays ahead, but Will Jenkins every bit as fast as him in this one. Mikey Doble, meanwhile, has slipped back now into the clutches of Will Orton and Ruben Haig. That's a three-way fight for third place, you can see in the background, but this is where it is at. Will Jenkins really could do with getting ahead of Horton, outscoring him a bit. You get 35 points for a race win, 30 for second, plus bonus points for fastest laps. Here was the overtake. That was really clever stuff from Jenkins. He made sure that Horton wasn't defending and then went for the late move. It almost worked, just couldn't quite keep the car on the line through the apex of the corner. But he could try that again next time they get round there. He's even looking to the inside through Dingledale. That is not a place you really want to be trying to make an overtake. Very risky place to go side by side, and he thinks better of it, really just trying to distract the race leader. There is the three-way fight going on for third. Doble ahead of Orton, ahead of Haig. Don't know where to look in this race, do you? Typical Ginetta GT5 challenge action. Defensive line from Horton into Clearways, but then he just gets back over onto the racing line. That shouldn't therefore compromise his exit speed too much, but Jenkins is took right up on his rear bumper, look. Across the line they go. Jenkins pulls to the outside line, perhaps trying to sell the dummy again, but there's no way that Harley Horton's going to fall for that 2 laps in a row. He defends the middle ground into the corner. Will that compromise his exit though? Yes, it does. It's Horton who runs wide this time, and Jenkins might just have the overlap on the inside line to Druids. Yes, he does. Squirrely under braking, desperate to get the car stopped, but Jenkins this time I think has done it. Runs wide on the exit, but that doesn't matter. The next corner is a left-hander, and Harley Horton is not going to be given the inside line. Will Jenkins knows the significance of this battle, knows the significance of beating Horton in this race, and he has now got the race lead. Again, though, he defends towards Surtees. Horton to the outside. This is a proper battle here between the top 2 drivers in the championship, neither one wanting to give way. And Will Jenkins, having got through, of course, is now punching the hole in the air for his teammate to follow him, and that might just allow Harley Horton to strike back at him. There go Doble, Orton and Haig, third, fourth and fifth. The leaders jockeying again towards Hawthorn. They're getting dangerously close here to making multiple changes of direction in the braking zone, I would say, because there, look, to the inside goes Jenkins, then back to the outside, although he left a car's width that time as they turned into Westfield Corner. And going in on that slightly tighter trajectory just allows the chasing car to carry more momentum through the turn, carry that momentum through the dip, over the other side, through Sheen Curve. We're not even halfway through this race, but it has got all the hallmarks of one of those typical down-to-the-wire Ginetta GT5 races. Neither of those drivers able to escape. Gerson Zarpello, is off. That's at Surtees. Gets the car fired up again, though, and will rejoin the circuit. Right, leaders out of Clearways, and now it's role reversal because it's a better exit from Clearways for Horton, who is in the wheel tracks and Will Jenkins. Jenkins will surely have to defend at paddock and then risks being slow on the exit, as we saw for Horton a lap ago. So Jenkins defends the inside line. Horton, you can see visibly through the second phase of the corner, carries more speed up the hill, but not quite enough to get the overlap to the inside line. Goes to the outside instead. Will Jenkins stands his ground on the inside, drifts wide as he did a lap ago when he was making the move, but drifts a bit wider this time, and Harley Horton is fully alongside into Graham Hill Bend. Again, wide line in, tighter line out, but the line is covered by Jenkins coming off the corner. If they keep this up, by the way, then Doble, Orton and Haig are going to catch them, because on the previous lap, they were quite significantly slower than the three behind, and in the first sector on this lap in particular, they really are dropping time now, almost half a second lost in the first sector alone. So there, look, Mikey Doble, who's just got a car length or so in hand now over Will Orton fourth and Ruben Haig fifth. They are getting closer and closer to picking up the slipstream from those leading two. And they could all come together, and that in a way is what Jenkins wants, because right now Harley Horton is concentrating 100% on putting the pressure on Jenkins. If some other cars arrive behind Harley, that will distract Harley. It might make him think twice about going for a risky move, and there is also the opportunity for other drivers to get between them, and that's really what Jenkins wants. Beating Horton by one position at the moment would only gain him 5 points in the championship. If some other drivers get in between them, though, then Jenkins could close in even further. Gap between them coming into this race stood at 19 points, so even 5 points would help, but I'm sure that Will would like to get maybe Mikey Doble and Will Orton between himself and Harley Horton before the end of the race, which is 8 minutes away. Back across the line we go towards Paddock Hill Bend. Again, Jenkins has no choice but to go into paddock on that tighter line, but he's stopping the car a bit better now than he was earlier on. Hitting the apex, not running too wide on the exit of the corner. On that lap, they were about 7/10 slower than Mikey Doble, who is now within a second of the leading two. You can see them all in one shot now as they come out of Druids and into the 90-degree left-hander at Graham Hill Bend. Better exit there for Horton, but Jenkins ain't going to leave the inside open, is he? He's going to force Horton into going for a risky move, and this is where Harley, young as he is, ex-Ginetta Junior racer, of course, Harley Horton, this is where he needs to think sensibly, think about the championship. That looks like Dave Sutton off the road, or has been off the road at Druids, going slowly, recovering from a moment. But yeah, Harley Horton, the temptation here, that the racer in him is screaming, attack, attack, win the race, but that's not necessarily the right thing to do. If he just sits behind Jenkins, then they won't be caught by the other drivers, and he's got a second place in the bag, but he keeps on attacking, he keeps on forcing Jenkins to defend. That's slowing them both down, and it's bringing Doble, Orton, Haig right back into it round the outside at Sheen Curve. Is not a sensible move to make, and almost contact made as they turn into the right-hander. Harley Horton throwing everything at this. There's a yellow flag out, though, at Surtees, and a safety car. The safety car is being put out on track because there is a car in the gravel, and also that is Karim Sekat. Karim Sekat is in the barriers coming out of Paddock Hill Bend, the AM Championship contender, out of the race. Now, who is this? This is, that's Zarpello again, I think, isn't it? After having had a spin at Surtees, I reckon that is the number 22 car. Yes, it is. So Gerson Zarpello, the Brazilian driver for Zentek Motorsport, beached in the gravel at Surtees. That, combined with Karim Sekat off the road at Paddock, means we're getting a safety car, and that's a real shame because the race was just starting to come to a head. Mikey Doble had pretty much arrived on the tail of the leaders, who themselves were getting into a more and more intense lead battle, and unfortunately we have to hit the pause button. So Jenkins then with the lead, Horton second. There is Gerson trudging through the gravel, not an easy thing to do, and especially when you are racked with disappointment for your race coming to an end. The marshals will go to work, the recovery crews. 2 cars to move now, of course. Thankfully, we saw both drivers getting out of their cars, and particularly thankful to see Karim Sekat get out of the car, because that looked like it had been a pretty hefty whack with the tyre wall coming out of Paddock Hill Bend. So 5.5 minutes to go then. Will Jenkins leads the race. Second place is Harley Horton. Now Jenkins will, if he hangs on to the win, which of course there is a good chance he will now, because the safety car being out into the final quarter of the race means that if we do go racing again, it may only be for a lap or so. Jenkins, if he wins the race, he has got the fastest lap as well, so that's 36 points for him. Harley Horton would pick up 30 points for finishing in second position, and a bonus point for the pole position, because the grid for this race was based upon the second fastest lap times from qualifying yesterday. So 32 points for Horton by my maths means it's actually only a 4-point gain at the moment for Jenkins. As for the fight for third, Conor Grady currently sits down in 7th place. He's having a disappointing weekend, is Conor, so 16 points for him, compared to Mikey Doble in third, who would score himself 26. So that would be enough then to put Doble by 6 points ahead of Conor Grady for third place in the championship. The AM rankings, of course, Chris White still leading the way. Yes, in 10th place overall, having eventually got past Sam Harvey and into that 10th place overall, but the class lead is the point. He had the pole position. He has, I would imagine, got the fastest lap. His best lap of 42.972. Yeah, it's not been beaten by anybody else, so he's on course for the maximum 37 points as well. And of course, Sekat, another non-score, with Paolo Santi running actually third, because Balsidou has got ahead of Paolo Santi in the AM class battle. So Paolo Santi only third, 26 points for him. So shuffling of the championship standings, but a dramatic race. There's some great racing, but lately a couple of incidents. Now that is, I just noticed some damage to the front of Ignazio Zanon's car, and that's because he gave Dave Sutton a helping hand with his spin at Druid's Corner. So that's how Sutton ended up, we saw him recovering from that, and that's why there's damage to the front of the number 48 car. There is Santi, who of course had that spin, which is why he's dropped down to third. So actually this safety car, if we do go racing again, gives him half a chance of getting back ahead of Balsidou for second place. Balsidou is the next car ahead of him, that sort of white, orange, green and blue car. And so there is a chance that Paolo could gain another spot. But the likelihood of any of them catching Chris White is slim. Right, that's good news. Gerson Zappello back out of the gravel trap. We saw him walking away from his car. The marshals have ushered him back into it, and he is now back underway. Now, have they moved Karim Sekat's car? I think they have, you know. Peering out of the commentary box window, I think I can just about see that car up against the barriers, but not where it had crashed, in a much safer place further down the hill. So we might go racing this time. We'll keep an eye to the lights on the safety car. As long as the recovery vehicles and marshals are off the track, then we might be able to go racing, and that would give us enough probably for 2 more laps. It looks as though Jenkins is backing the pack up in anticipation of a restart, so I think we are going to go racing. Are the lights out? Yes, they are. So we should just about get 2 more laps in here then, in this Ginetta GT5 challenge race here. And an important couple of laps they could be, because all of a sudden Mikey Doble, Will Orton, Ruben Haig, even Kian Donaldson, they're all on the tail of Harley Horton and Will Jenkins. And if Horton loses more places, he loses more points to Jenkins in the championship. So across the line we go. It's going to be really close actually as to whether this is 1 or 2 laps. They're lapping in the 1:40s. I think it's going to be 1 more lap, isn't it? Because they crossed the line with 1:38 to go. So this might be the last lap of the race. And that's, in a way, good news for Harley Horton. Less opportunity for him to lose places, but I actually think he's more interested in getting the race lead. That's Ruben Haig through the gravel trap in the background. To the outside at Druids goes Horton. Here's Doble trying to get up the inside. Almost some contact there for the championship leader, but he manages to hang on to it. Ruben Haig then dropping right down the order. That promotes Kian Donaldson into the top 5 and makes it a 4-way shootout for the win, realistically. Jenkins, Horton, Doble and Orton together. And look, now Harley Horton, for the first time since he lost the lead anyway, is having to drive defensively, this time to try and keep Mikey Doble behind him. Doble will get much better traction off Surtees from that wider line in. They both pick up a slipstream though, of course, because they're both running behind the race leader, and that evens things out slightly as they drop down the hill. Horton will once again move to attack for the race lead. Jenkins to the inside, to the outside. That was almost contact as they went into the braking zone. Harley Horton could not be closer to his teammate as they head towards Westfield corner. Again, forces the defensive move out of Jenkins. This is really risky stuff though. There's every chance that Horton could lose out to Mikey Doble, but he might be up the inside. He is. They elbow each other. Contact on the grass for Horton. Inches away from disaster as they go through Dingle through Sheen Curve for the final time. 2 more corners to go. Can Will Jenkins hang on? Again, he covers the inside line into Surtees. That will slow him on the exit and back Horton up into the cars behind. 5 of them under a blanket as they head for the last corner, and Will Jenkins is not going to open up an inch of that inside line. He defends into the last turn. Horton with the better drive off the corner, but nowhere to go with it. I think Will Jenkins is just about going to hang on. Can Mikey Doble get alongside Horton? He's not quite going to get there. Will Jenkins will see the checkered flag and win by a nose in the second Ginetta GT5 Challenge race of the weekend. Harley Horton second, Mikey Doble third, Will Horton fourth, Cian Donaldson fifth. The top 5 covered by 0.6 of a second at the end of a thrilling race. Round number 14 of the championship, one of the best races of the season, and Will Jenkins manages somehow to hang on and get the victory ahead of his teammate, but that was some pretty feisty racing on that last lap. There was a bit of squeezing going on. There was certainly a lot of robust defending, but in fairness, Harley Horton was giving as good as he got, and it put on a real show for us and for the spectators trackside here at Brands Hatch. I'm sure really enjoyed that race. Shame about the safety car, but in the end, it made relatively little difference. Will Jenkins able to hang on, and we still got that thrilling shootout on the final lap. So, Will Jenkins claims the victory, an important one to narrow the margin now in the championship to Harley Horton. Mikey Doble gets another podium in third, Will Horton in fourth, and Cian Donaldson, good to see him back inside the top 5. Harry Mangan then was sort of best of the rest in sixth, ahead of Ruben Haig after that gravelly moment, perhaps on slightly cold tyres after the restart at Paddock Hill Bend, finishing just ahead though Conor Grady, who managed to lose a place in the closing stages, dropping him even further away now from Mikey Doble in the fight for third in the points. Ignazio Zanon was ninth ahead of Dave Sutton, with Chris White in 11th place overall, leading and winning in the AM category. Balsidou did fend off Paolo Santi on that final lap though for second place, so Balsidou second in AM and Paolo Santi in third. Well, Will Jenkins gets the race win, and by my mathematics, that puts him 15 points behind Harley Horton. A really important win that for Jenkins. And this is always going to be the challenge for them, managing this within the Elite Motorsport team. They are teammates, but they're going to have to do battle on the track, and if Jenkins can keep on beating Horton, then he can still very much beat him in the championship. 14th round of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge got underway with an excellent start made by Will Jenkins from the outside of row 1, but not quite good enough to get ahead of his teammate and championship rival Harley Horton, who led the field through Paddock Hill Bend from pole position. Jockeying for position heading towards Druids though was intense right from the get-go. Ruben Haig once again found himself on the outside line and shuffled out in the early running, dropping down the order after a grassy moment at Druids. Mike Doble was out with a mechanical failure, and in the early part of the race the top 2 did start to break away. The 2 teammates not exactly working together, but they seemed to have a bit of pace over the cars behind. Jenkins looked quicker than Horton, made a move into Paddock Hill Bend and briefly got the lead, but he clipped the curb on the way in, allowing Horton to execute a textbook switchback manoeuvre. There was a spin at Surtees corner for Gerson Zarpello. That wasn't the last time the Zentek Motorsport driver would be off the road, while Ignazio Zanon got into the side of Dave Sutton, sending the 14 car into a spin. Zarpello had another off at Surtees into the gravel trap at the same time that Karim Sekat went off at Paddock Hill Bend. That brought about a safety car, and when it came in, there was a one-lap shootout for the victory, at the start of which Ruben Haig was wide through the gravel and dropped out of contention. Harley Horton tried everything he could to find a way past Will Jenkins, even taking to the grass and making contact with his teammate through Dingle Dell, but all the while conscious that he had to try and hold on to second to minimise the damage being done in the points. It was a really good drive by Jenkins. He defended under immense pressure and claimed the victory in the second race of the weekend here at Brands Hatch. Another result like that in race 3 will make the championship extremely close, heading to the Donington decider.